Okay, book of Matthew, New Testament, book of Matthew. We just finished chapter 18, and boy, that was something, I'll tell you. Chapter 19 is supposed to rain the rest of the day all the way up till midnight, starting like noon to midnight, but on the Oregon coast. But we need the rain out here. Chapter 19, we go to divorce. Before I start this chapter, I'll give you a modern day update, 2023. Up to 80% of people get divorced. Now, it's still 50%, but that's only for first marriages, your first marriage. So now check this out. I'm going to keep this as simple as possible. I'm not going to judge anyone. That's between you and God. You know, divorce is not really against a man. It's against God. The Jews said to Jesus, well, Moses gave us divorce. Jesus said, you know, God allowed that because you were forcing the issue. But when you go to second and third marriages, it goes 60% and then 75 to 80% of all marriages get divorced. So if you've been married once and you couldn't make it work out, and of course it's your spouse's fault, you know, it's never your fault. It's always going to be your spouse's fault. So I'm being very sarcastic. So you think the solution to the problem is, well, I met another person, I'm going to marry the next person. But you never corrected the thing that's causing the divorce in the first place, and then that second marriage fails, and you go to the third marriage. So your first marriage lasted 10 years. Your second marriage lasts 7 years. Your third marriage lasts 2 or 3 years. I'm just telling you what the numbers are, the statistics. And you're like, wow, I'm getting worse and worse. No, that's just what happens. See, what you're basically doing is you're just getting better at getting divorced. I know, sounds sad, huh? But you never started out the first marriage in the correct way. Are you a Christian? And did you marry a Christian? And then your marriage has about an 80% chance of making it. The issue is not the divorce. The issue is the lack of Jesus before you get married. The first time. Chapter 19, when Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went into the region of the Judea to the other side of the Jordan. Large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. Some Pharisees came to him to test him. You see, here they come to test him again. But I explained to you in a few earlier chapters, they're not really trying to test him. They are really trying to protect their monthly financial income. I went into that in great detail in 2 or 3 or 4 chapters ago. Not chapters, but videos about how Jesus is really attacking their finances here, the way they make their living out, you know, using God falsely. So here they come once again to test him, but they're not really testing him. They're trying to prove him wrong. They're trying to prove that he is false and from the devil, so the people stop following him. And if the people stop following him, then they will always be in charge of the people and, you know, get the money from the people and misuse the money and have their lifestyle. Kind of like corporations today. Corporations today pay a CEO, $80 million a year, and they pay a minimum wage worker, $9 an hour. Now, that's capitalism. You don't like it, well, you don't have to participate. And if they don't like you, they can fire you at any moment they want. But we're talking about divorce. Some Pharisees came to him to test him, Jesus. They asked, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Well, that is what is happening today. You can get divorced for any and every reason you want. When I was a child, you still had to have a reason to tell the judge why you want to leave this spouse, your wife. Otherwise, you would have had to pay not child support, you would have had to pay alimony. Because most wives were housewives when I was a little boy. And if you left your wife, you would have had to give her some kind of support because she's never had a job. She's going to be destitute. And there was no welfare back then. Today you get divorced, you get all the free welfare, plus you have to pay child support. But today, alimony basically doesn't exist anymore. But they're trying to trick him. Jesus said, haven't you read, Jesus replied, haven't you read that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female? Oh, well, now, wait a minute, Lord. You can't say that in today's society. You cannot say male and female out loud on the talk shows today. We have 2,953 different genders today. Because, we are so progressive. Look what Jesus just said here. Wait a minute. God made them male and female. In the beginning, the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. In a different part of the Bible, it says, what God has joined, let no man separate. So Jesus, his first response is, do not get divorced because God married you, joined you together as one. That's why you have a cord of 3 strands, in case you've never heard this. The 2 strands are the husband and the wife. The 3rd strand is Jesus wrapping around the husband and the wife. 3 strands. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. That means with Jesus, your marriage can withstand quite a few things. I'll tell you here a story about farmers in Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, Kansas, Illinois, northern Missouri, Nebraska. I'll tell you about farmers. I'm not going to any other states where the cattle and stuff like that. I don't know cattle myself or horses. I know farming. I know crops, grain, farmers. I know men who've been married to their wives for 40 years. And they married a beauty queen. I've seen pictures of these women, and I was related to some of these women, like second or third cousin, whatever. I saw pictures of these girls at 19, and they won Iowa County Fair Beauty Queen contest. These women were so attractive. So, they were raised on a farm. They married a guy on a farm. 40 years later, they're 59 years old. They have 6 kids. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm making a point. The woman looks like a Sasquatch. The woman went from a beauty queen after 40 years of hard work on the farm, after 40 years of bearing 6 children and raising them all, after 40 years of going out in the field and doing hard work. These women, used to be 5'11", 132 pounds, won a beauty queen contest. Now wait for the end of the story. Wait for the end of the story. It's going to put you to shame. It's going to put you to shame today. These women were 280 pounds, almost 6 foot tall, strong as an ox, tired, wore out, had a lot of fat on them, but they still kept cooking, doing the farm work, cooking, taking care of the farm, taking care of their husband. Now here you go. If you were to ask that woman's husband in a Midwestern farm, this is how I grew up. If you were like the guy's best friend or something, and you said, what do you think about your wife today? You married a beauty queen, but what do you think about her today? That guy would say, oh, I'm so blessed by God. She's more beautiful today than she ever was her whole life. Now, the guy standing on the outside is thinking, well, hey, hold on. She looks like a female Sasquatch walking around the farm. This 60-year-old male farmer and his 60-year-old wife, he loves her more today. He loves her more today than he ever has. He looks at her, he still has stars in his eyes when his wife comes in and hands him a plate of biscuits. I have seen it firsthand. I've been in the kitchen with these people watching them. The first 20, 30 years of my life, I watched these people. I've seen 70-year-old men look at their 70-year-old wives and whistle and go, ooh, you look good today, honey. And they're not joking around and they're not lying to get along. They honestly, truly believe what they're saying. And for them in their mind, it's true. It's real. In their mind, it's real, number one. And in their mind, they are truly in love with their wife. Every year that goes by, their love just grows and grows and grows. And every year, the woman's like, oh, I don't look that good anymore. How could you love me? Because that's the way women get when they get older. Oh, I think my husband's crazy. And I'm telling you, if you just talk to the husband, I've talked to dozens of them, if not a couple hundred of them. Because I was born and raised there, I grew up there. They wouldn't leave their wives. If you ask them, when are you going to leave your wife? The answer, they'd say, well, when one of us gets put in the ground 6 foot under. I'd never leave my wife. She's the best woman on earth. These men do not have affairs. They don't look at pornography. And I'll tell you why, because this was back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Pornography wasn't really available like it is today. These men, they could have a young woman come up to them and say, hey, how about, we have an affair and fool around. This old farmer would say, oh, you remind me of one of my granddaughters. You need a spanking. You need to mind your manners, young lady. I'm in love with my wife. I'm telling you, I grew up in a whole completely different time where men did not divorce their wife. And the proper term is put away your wife. And if some girl who's divorced is listening, I do not mean to hurt your feelings by using the phrase put away. But you've been put away. So your husband, your modern day husband, all you got to do is go marry an old farmer. Well, your husband has put you away. He's put you off. He has other things in mind, and you are no longer invited. Now, the guy's making a mistake in the eyes of God. In the eyes of Jesus Christ, he's making a mistake. Now, listen. Haven't you read, Jesus replied, that in the beginning, the Creator made them male and female? That's a whole different issue that I just kind of sarcastically brought up. We live in a society, you don't only not get divorced, you can't even call people male or female today without getting kicked out of college, getting kicked out of school, or getting kicked out. You can't even call a person a male or a female. We've gone so far past divorce that we're now into changing the gender. Okay, well, first of all, it all started, so you think there's not going to be any consequences out there for your behavior. It starts with divorce, which is against God. And when you plant divorce, you're planting seeds in your garden of divorce, like weeds. And that divorce seeds of divorce, are going to grow into something years down the road. So what has it grown into in this evil garden that Americans keep planting? It starts with divorce. Okay, we're so used to get married, between 50% and 80% divorce rate. I knew a guy who was married 4 times. And he was a friend of mine, and he was joking around. He goes, Dave, it's not 80%. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. And he was trying to debate with me, and the Lord gave me the answer. I said, well, it even goes up to 100%. He says, you're crazy, Dave. That doesn't work. I said, how many times you been married? He goes, 4. I said, how many times you been divorced? He goes, 4. I said, so for you, it's 100% divorce rate. You've been married and divorced 100% of the time. And the guy stopped and says, well, damn, you got me there, Dave. I got nothing to say. I said, you're the person I'm talking about. You're the one who has the 100% divorce rate. And he goes, wow. He said, maybe I should never get married again. I told him you should become a minister and help people. But anyways, these men on the farm, divorce was a big thing back then. Oh, what I was saying, I'm sorry. So it started with divorce. You planted seeds of divorce, but then it went to anybody could get married. That was only about 15 years ago here in America. Any person could get married. So then anyone could get married. Man can marry man, woman can marry woman. That's legal now. Okay. They told us 15 years ago that was the solution to the marriage problems in America. I keep track of all this stuff. I know exactly what they were saying. Okay, that didn't work either, because now homosexuals get divorced now this is funny, at the exact same rate as men and women. Men and women, 50% minimum. If a man marries a man, 50% minimum divorce rate. If a woman marries a woman, 50% divorce rate. So that wasn't the solution. So what grew out of this? What is your garden, the seeds you planted, America planted? What is it growing? What is it growing? Well, now we're changing genders. You see, we're saying, well, the problem is, you're trying to put a man and a woman in a box, and you're trying to force people to be either a man or either a woman. No, we're not trying to force it. That's the way God designed it. And that's how you're born. And of course, they want to take some severe cases. Maybe there's 30 severe cases in the whole United States, and then they want to push that on every single, all 300 million people. Now, okay, so now we're going through that in about the past 5 years. Now, the big thing is they want children at 5 years old in kindergarten to decide on their own without the parents whether a 5-year-old needs to decide whether they're a boy or a girl. But guess what? It's not fixing the problem. Haven't you read? He replied. Now, he's talking to people who do not believe any of this stuff. That at the beginning, the Creator, why is Jesus bringing this up? Because he knows that the people believe what God did. So they come to Jesus to make him look foolish in front of the people. But Jesus turns around, tells them the truth, making them look foolish in front of the people. It gets turned upside down, backwards, back on themselves. That at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female. Why didn't he say God the Father? Why did he use the word Creator? Because he's saying this was God's plan. God's creation. I, God, created them male and female. It said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. Now, it's funny because when you have young people living at home with their parents, they're going against God's plan. You're supposed to be a man who takes his wife, go get your own place to live, and start living with God's rules. But what people do in 2023, they say, well, we're married, and we told our parents we got to live with you. Because they're trying to change God's rules by living with their parents. And now they're screwing up their parents. But they're also they're relying on the parents. They're not really relying on God to take care of them. If you can't do that, then don't get married in the first place. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. That does not mean, hey, we got married, it was a great honeymoon, and you go right back home to your parents' house to live, like you never got married in the first place. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Let no one separate. So when you get married and then you go back to your parents' house to live, you're allowing the world to separate you. Now, I know I'm not convincing any young people to believe what I'm saying. I understand that. Why then, they asked, so now they're going to try to, okay, here we go. Okay, we got this Jesus now. Because you got to understand, some of the men coming to talk to him are divorced. Why then, they asked, did Moses command, that's a key word, command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Well, Moses did not command it. God did not command it. They're trying to use that word like, they're trying to make it sound like, why did Moses force us to do this? I didn't leave my wife. Moses made me leave my wife. Come on, give me a break. These people are snakes in the grass. They will lie, steal, kill, anything to destroy, to get what they want. To get what they want. My friend used to have a saying when he was drinking beer. Now, he was a nice guy. He didn't mean it, but he used to say it because he worked at a packing house and stuff, and he was kind of rough. And he thought it was funny. So he was drinking beer, and he'd say, hey, let me make a toast. He'd say, here's to you, here's to me. If ever we should disagree, screw you, here's to me. And that, that is so much more true today than you realize. When I just went through the Bible study of the last religion, the second to last religion on earth is the religion of selfism, self. Here's to me, here's to you, here's to me. If ever we should disagree, screw you, and here's to me. Well, that's what they're saying to God in 2023. Here's to God, and here I am. If I ever disagree with what God is teaching, well, I'm just going to be, here's to me. I'll just raise the glass to me from now on, and I'll just stop talking about God altogether. Jesus replied. See, they're trying to, blame Moses. Really? It's like your children. It's like your children, You come out and some of the cookies in the kitchen are missing. And the kid has crumbs on his face. And he turns to the little 3-year-old brother and says, well, he made me do it. So you play along because you go, well, how did he make you do it? Well, he said the word cookie. And I was the only one tall enough to reach the cookies, and I gave him some cookies first. You see, these guys are trying to blame Moses. Then they're trying to switch God's teachings around. So Jesus told them Moses permitted. Now, what did they say? Moses commanded that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce. Down here it says Moses permitted. You see how Jesus brought the word way down. Moses didn't command you. Moses only permitted you. Okay. Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. Oh my gosh. Your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. That's right. It was not this way from Adam and Eve up until Moses. God said a man and a woman shall not divorce. You shall not let no one separate the man and the woman because God joined them together. Made them one. Told them to leave their mother and father and cling to each other. That is, now I will tell you, the number one reason, I just said it, the number one reason that causes divorce today. Since the 1980s, actually, the word cling together. When you get off work, you're supposed to go home to your spouse and cling to your spouse and cling to your children. And I'm not exaggerating, like it's your last night with them on earth. Like this could be your last night with your wife and kids. You are to cling to them. Your wife is to cling to you like Sarah called Abraham her master, her teacher. Abraham's wife, Sarah, called him husband, but master. She called him master. She clung to him like Ruth clung to Boaz for everything she needed. This is God's original plan, that a man leaves his mother, father, mother, gets a wife and clings to her, holds her, loves her, enjoys her, wants to be around her, holds her hand, brushes her hair, wants to give her advice, wants to help her. Honey, do you need anything today? The man, a Christian man, has to take charge of his Christian household. And I know this is not politically correct today, but as you can tell, I really don't care. what people think about what I say. I'm a nobody. I got no power to change the world. You are to take charge and control of your Christian wife just as you are your children. The problem is today, most Christian men do not step up to the job. Now, and here's I told you I'd tell you the number one thing that causes divorce today. You're clinging to the things of this world, and they are separating you from clinging to your spouse. I'm going to say that one more time. Listen carefully. The thing that causes divorce in today's society, either the man or the woman or both, stop clinging to each other. Actually, they probably never did it in the first place. Because I'm not talking about sex. Sex is not clinging. To cling to someone, you just want to be with them all the time. They're your main gift, like a great jewel that God gave you from heaven. So you say, "Oh, that sounds I'm not going to cling to my wife all the time." Well, okay, but you cling to football, basketball, baseball, hot dogs, ribs. You cling to the world like you're married to the world. I hope that puts you to shame, actually. Even if you're not divorced, you still have that problem in today's society. Your wife is over here clinging to her girlfriends and gossiping and shopping. You're over here clinging to your buddies, your man cave buddies, and you're cursing and you're acting stupid and you're just an idiot. I don't know how else to say it. I know people. And she's clinging over here and you're clinging over there. Well, how is that God's plan? Do you know how, if any of you have ever had preteen girls who have gone through preteen and then teenagers? A 10-year-old girl clings. Now I'm talking about your marriage. A 10-year-old girl clings to her dad like he is an extension of her own arms and legs. I mean, a 8, 9, 10-year-old girl clings to her daddy like, she's like, "I love you, Dad. You're the greatest." She like hangs on him. Sometimes the dad's like, "Get off me, man." She clings to him. "Oh, man, let's watch TV. Everything my dad does, I want to do." She would go to work with her dad if she could. And then she turns 12 years old. And like the very next day, she tells the same dad she was clinging to, "I hate your guts. You're a creep. I hate you. Get away from me. You're an old man." Because she goes through that preteen and teenage years to where all of a sudden she just completely flips out. Now, it's just growth spurts. She's growing, becoming a young woman. And she starts clinging to the world. She's clinging to the world. And now she hates her dad. And a lot of young girls, they become closer to their mother thinking they're looking for an answer of, why is my dad so weird all of a sudden? Well, it's not the dad. It's the person, the young girl who started clinging to the world. Have you ever gone into the bedroom, told your kids, get ready for bed, and they can't put their cell phone down? They're clinging to the cell phone like it's their life. Google's definition of cling, C-L-I-N-G, hold on tightly to something. She clung to her husband's arm. That's what your marriage is supposed to. That's what I said. These old farmers, they've been married 40, 50 years. They're still clinging to each other like it's their honeymoon. There's nothing more beautiful than seeing an old couple that only hangs out with each other. They're so still madly in love with each other. Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery. So if you left your wife and neither one of you committed sexual immorality, you're committing adultery. You are allowed to leave your wife if she went with another man, or she's allowed to leave you if you went with another woman. But there is a law in the Bible that if you divorce your wife and then she goes out a few years later and she gets remarried, but then divorces that man also, you are not allowed to go back and remarry your old wife. That is also adultery. In the eyes of God, you're sleeping with another man's wife. In the eyes of God, a piece of paper, a divorce paper, does not make you divorced in the eyes of God. Well, that changes everything. Well, I'm divorced legally. You are legally divorced by the laws of the United States of America. But you are not divorced by the eyes of God, except for sexual immorality. The disciples said to him, if this is the situation between a husband and wife, it is better not to marry. Well, that's not true. I mean, they have lack of faith. You marry because you're in love with a person and you can't be without them. You go out with them for 6 months and you realize, without you, my life will not be as good. So you get married somewhere down the road. You do not live together. You're not supposed to have sex before marriage. You cling to each other. You hold each other, you know. You go to a movie, you hold each other. You go out to dinner, you hold hands. Nothing more beautiful than an 80-year-old couple walking down the road holding hands. In the restaurant business, I had a young couple. This guy said, we're on our honeymoon. No, not honeymoon. He says, we're celebrating our anniversary, I meant to say. And they were both like 75 years old. I said, oh, yeah, your 50th anniversary? He said, nope. We've been married for 1 year. We just got married. 1 year is our first year anniversary. They were pushing 80 years old. They were both married before, and their spouses died naturally, and they were widows and widower, and they found each other and got married. That's all legal. You can do that in the eyes of God. You are married until one of you die. The disciples said to him, well, then is it better to not marry? Now remember, some of the disciples were married. Jesus replied, not everyone can accept the word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others. Now here we go, a man and a woman. Jesus said, you know what a eunuch is? A man without a penis. Sometimes if you want to serve a great king, because he has a large harem of wives or something, he cuts, I'm not making this up, it's not something I would do. He cuts off his servants' penises to ensure that the line in the kingdom stays pure, and without their penises, they can't get his wives pregnant. Like the ones who go in and tend to his wives. But Jesus just said some people are born as eunuchs. Some people are born without penises. Males, men, or they got a little stub there or something. I'm not trying to get detailed. I'm making the point. They're still a man because of their chromosomes. But the world says, oh, you were disformed at birth without a penis, so you get to choose whether you're a man or a woman. That is 100% false according to Jesus, what he just said there. Not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were born that way. And there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, by kings and stuff. And there are those who choose to live like a eunuch, live a life without sex, for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. You can live a sexless life to honor God's name. I'm not talking about married people. I'm talking about people who don't get married. So I'm talking about people who don't get married. I think in a marriage, as long as it's not abusive or anything, if you're not having love making with your spouse, you're dividing your marriage. You can ask any psychiatrist or psychologist or therapist or marriage counselor. They will say a lot of women turn 60 years old and they tell their husbands, I don't ever want to sleep with you again. We've had enough sex. I want to live without sex the rest of my life. I just don't enjoy it anymore, and I don't want to do it. And that drives the husband into the arms of another woman. I'm just telling you what it is, how it is, the way it is. You're driving your husband away. You've been sleeping with this man for 40 years. And just all of a sudden you say, I know you enjoy sex, but I don't ever want to do it again, so you'll just have to do whatever I say. No, it doesn't work. The one who can accept this should accept it. In other words, Paul spoke of this briefly also. If you're going to stay single, now sex outside of marriage was not allowed in the Old Testament, or it's not allowed now either, but in the eyes of God. We live in a world where people have sex with themselves 4 or 5 times a day looking at pornography, just sitting in their car. That's how creepy and weird pornography is destroying this world. So Jesus is saying, if you don't want to get married, you better be prepared to live like a eunuch without sex. Because if you don't want to, see, I know a lot of guys, well, one of my best friends who died about 6 years ago now, he was an old guy and he owned a house on the coast and he had money. And he, 40-year-old women would come up to him once in a while. I'm like, oh, hi there. What's your name? And he was like, my name's so-and-so. And you want to go out to dinner some night? And they'd end up having sex. Just like the rest of the world does now. So he thought it was better to stay single and then just sleep with whoever he wanted to. He thought that that was the solution to not getting divorced. And I explained to him, which he did not like. He got very angry at me. I said, well, that's against God. You're not supposed to have sex outside of a marriage. If you want to have sex, you're supposed to get married. God does not like it. It's in the Bible. And he told me he knew it was in the Bible. He got mad and angry and didn't talk to me for 2 or 3 weeks. I'm just telling you. And then I'm going to end this chapter. Well, I'm going to end this video. God's only plan is, if you do not want to get married and you want to stay single, the only way you can honor God is by living a life without sex. Sex is not allowed outside of marriage. And then if you want to get married, the only way you can honor God is if you stay married to that person faithfully and cling to them, giving them everything you have until death do you part. One of you dies. Those are the only 2 things that God has given as far as sex is concerned and marriage is concerned and being single is concerned. If you're going to be single, if you want to honor God in a single life, you cannot have sex as a single person. Well, I'm going to marry the girl anyway. I'm going to get engaged. We're planning on getting married. That's fine. You're supposed to wait till your wedding night, according to God. I'm only giving you the God rules. Now, that's why back then, when you decided to marry a woman, you usually got married the next week. They wouldn't make, today the problem is people say, well, we want to be engaged for 2 years first. The problem is, seriously, you say, well, how long have you two been living together? And they go, well, we've been living together for 12 years. Well, why don't you get married? Well, one thing leads to another. They don't want to get married. In case it doesn't work, they don't want to get divorced. This way they can say, it's kind of like an abortion. If you're not having an abortion with a 6-month-old baby, you're not committing abortion. If you're taking the morning after pill, and the pill is just going in and aborting like the fluids, then it's not a baby, they say. So I'm not really having an abortion if I just have an abortion right away. So if I live with someone for 10 years and then we decide to go our separate ways, we never got divorced. Well, what it was in the eyes of God, now not my rules, in the eyes of God, you were living a sinful life for 10 years outside of God, and in no way, shape, or form were you honoring God by living together at all, ever. You could say, well, no, we both still went to church. Or, well, God didn't honor it. Well, we still gave money to the church. God did not honor it because you were living in sin. See, we're taking whatever rules God made, and we want to change those rules. God made one man and one woman. Well, we want to change that. God gave marriage and said, do not get divorced. Well, man has changed that. God made only 2 genders. Okay, we want to change that. God said a marriage is between a man and a woman. Okay, the society has changed that. Men can marry men and women can marry women. I suspect in the future you'll be able to marry your pet, your dog or your cat. Sometime in the future, that will be the solution. Sometime the Supreme Court in the future, if the rapture does not come first, they will allow you to marry your cat or your dog. We take whatever God says and then we change it. But then we want our cake and we want to eat it too. We say, well, we don't want God mad at us. I mean, no Christian wants God mad at you. No Christian wants Jesus to say, you're living in sin and you're dishonoring my Father by the way you're living. If you're in a relationship with a woman, several years living together, if you want to honor the Father, go down and get married. Go down and get married in one afternoon and get it over with. But you don't want to honor the Father. You want to please yourselves. And I don't care. I have never once, in all my 61 years, all the tens of thousands of people I waited on in restaurants, I have never once met a woman that had lived with a man over 5 years that didn't secretly want the guy to get married to her. Now, I've met a lot of men, countless men who want to play the bachelor, but have the milk cow at home, so to speak. I met a lot of men who are with a girl, but then they like to go down and play around because they're not married. But, if they kind of strike out down at the bar, then they can go home to the old milk cow and still get some milk. I'm not being rude. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being 100% serious. I grew up in a time where I saw farmers. I mean, I have personally known people married 63 years. I think my uncle was married 58 years. It's a long time. They would never think about getting divorced. I hate to tell you this, but when you get over 60 years old, you're not going to look as good as you did when you're 20 years old. I always laugh when people say that 20-year-olds are homely or ugly or there's something wrong with them. I'm like, wait till you're 60. I don't care what you look at like at 20. It's the best that person's ever going to look. They look fantastic. Wait till you're 70 or 80, and the reason I mention that, is because your wife's also going to be 70 or 80. Are you going to still honor God and cling to her? Are you going to cling to your wife and still be madly in love with her? Because I will end with this. They said Moses commanded us to give a divorce certificate. Jesus says, no, Moses permitted, because you had hardened hearts. God never gave that. God never allowed a divorce certificate. That's something Moses permitted because their hearts were hardened in the desert for 40 years. That's when all this began. Marriage is one of the three most screwed up things on planet Earth today. Now, just think now, what do I tell you in these Bible studies? Whatever God has made or created or set into place or commanded, the devil comes behind to destroy it, to confuse it, to make it all screwed up for the man and the woman. The devil comes behind and screws it up. Yes. God made marriage. So the devil, you see what he's done in since Adam and Eve. You see how the devil has completely destroyed a relationship between a man and a woman. And I feel sorry for Generation Z, Gen Z today. Oh my gosh. Those people don't even want to hold hands. They don't want to look at each other. They think the person of the opposite sex is some kind of a creepo. They do not want to have children. The marriage is completely out of the question. We might live together just to share the monthly rental expenses. We might have sex, but Gen Z says, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm not kidding you. In Generation Z, and I'm going to tell you how the devil has ruined this world marriage-wise. Gen Z, this is true. It's a statistic. You can look it up. Gen Z is creating, this is people under 25. They're creating more lesbians today than people are that generation getting married. There are more Gen Z lesbians, 2 girls think they're in love with each other because the devil has lied to them and tricked them. Gen Z has more lesbians than marriages. That is 100% a fact.